Hi, we're here together today with Jean Bell. I'm Sherry Peterson. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jean?
I live in Evergreen, Colorado. I'm a retired professor of computer science. I have a lifelong interest in helping people to communicate better. One of the things that I've done is to study something called nonviolent communication. And I've also done a lot of teaching in other situations, including for private computer companies. And after I got into nonviolent communication, I started teaching nonviolent communication. Taught in a lot of different formats, including a course that I developed in Civil Discourse. And most of the courses I taught were around basic skills for communication.
So you've been at this for a while. How long would you say you've been working with it?
Well, I retired from being a professor and teaching computer science in 2001. I got introduced to nonviolent communication in 2006, so that was 14 years ago. So I've been around the teaching of nonviolent communication for pretty much 14 years.
Please tell us what you would say about polarization. What is polarization?
Well, like many words in communication, polarization has a lot of different meanings to different people. For me, polarization refers to the grouping of opinions around two extremes. I'm not talking here about ordinary conflict. Conflict can be very useful. It can cause everyone to think beyond their first reaction. What I'm talking about here is opposite positions in which both sides refuse to talk with or even consider the merits of the other side.
Okay. Could you give us some idea about why polarization is such a problem?
Well, here's an example. What could be a more graphic demonstration of the interconnection of all people than a pandemic? A small virus, a rapid spread by commerce and travel, and each of us in our own communities, even when one person gets sick, then many of us will probably also get sick. Unless we think we can stay isolated forever, we need each other to stay well and get well. We are connected by the very air we breathe and the paths that we travel. This current demonstration of interconnectedness has brought us together in many ways. We've seen an incredible outpouring of neighbors helping neighbors get food, stay well. But as the weeks of the pandemic have worn on, we've also seen a return of the polarization that we experienced in America before the pandemic. We've seen armed men storm the Capitol in Michigan demanding their freedom, including the freedom to infect others with disease and death. Closer to my home, a friend on her way to the hospital in Denver for cancer treatment was verbally and almost physically attacked for wearing a mask. Her mask was not infringing upon anyone's rights, but I'm guessing it must have symbolized something sinister to her attackers. Polarization obscures what was once broad common ground on American values, things like life, liberty, fairness, and respect for others. Now we talk about culture wars, and we use the language of military battles to describe people who disagree with us. This leads to demonization of the other side, where we begin to think that people who disagree with us are our enemies, that they are evil, that they want to harm us. When we think of people as enemies and that they are evil and intend to harm us, we dehumanize them. We then allow ourselves to show contempt for them personally and to completely disregard their opinions and eventually to justify violence against them. Pretty soon this hardens into tribes or camps. Each group knows that they alone have the truth. Verbal or physical violence can often follow.
This is just so relevant for today. I just so appreciate you sharing what you know about this. Tell me why I should care about polarization.
Well, it depends on how you'd like to live. Do you want to live in a way where other people hate you just because you disagree with them? Do you want to carry around hatred in your own heart? Hatred for neighbors, former friends, politicians, followers of those politicians? That's a lot of hate to carry, which can lead to personal stress and unhappiness. The current pandemic shows the need to work together to solve common problems. Natural disasters like earthquakes, social issues like education or healthcare are other examples of common problems that we cannot address alone. We need to be able to work with people who disagree with us to solve these common problems. When we are so polarized that we can't even discuss our common problems, it's almost impossible to come together to solve them. And if one side imposes its own solution, the other side is probably going to rebel or retaliate.
Let's talk a little bit more about polarization for me as an individual, as well as the community and the country as a whole, how it's a problem.
Well, it's a problem on any level. Wherever you need to be able to work together and where it's hard to talk with people who disagree with you, it can be a problem. As individuals, as a family, in a community, or in the nation as a whole.
Yeah.
We've certainly seen this. We've certainly seen this widely in the news lately.
Well, we see it in everywhere, even between the maskers and the non-maskers, the immunization
Right.
and the non-immunization. Just every single topic, it seems like, is really one side or the other, and people are vehemently sure that their own belief system is the belief system. So this work is so crucial. What do you think can be done about all of this polarization?
Well, I don't think it's the kind of problem that can be legislated. We can't outlaw polarization. Instead, I think we need to approach this as an issue of social norms. What kind of society do we want to live in? How can I personally talk with people that I disagree with? And then we have to educate ourselves and our society. And this means our friends, our neighbors, our opponents, and our leaders about the cost of polarization versus the benefits and the techniques, the proven techniques for working together.
Yeah, I look forward to talking more about techniques that you know and share with people. But it sounds like we're just talking about, on some level, just being nice to people. Is it more than that?
Yeah, it's a lot more than that. Being nice is a good first step, but we can be polite and still seethe with contempt for somebody. I think for me, the key is to be curious about what people on the other side are thinking and why they are thinking it. What can I learn that might be helpful to me from the personal experience and beliefs of others? And what can they learn from me? If we can really listen to the other side, we can begin to understand where they're coming from and why. Then we can again see the other side as human, with personal feelings and needs, not an enemy set on doing us harm. And when we see the other side as human, when we treat them with dignity and consideration, when they feel heard, in most cases, they'll calm down and be willing to listen to our own feelings and needs. not because we've convinced them to be nice, but because they see value in treating us the way they want to be treated. When we understand the other side, I believe we will find that most of us have those common values. Working from basic agreement on common values, we're more likely to find common solutions to the conflicts of any kind. And even if we can't find a common solution, we can often find ways to work together on different strategies toward the same end.
Yeah, that's really important. It makes me think about some of the times in my direct selling experience when we were learning how to talk with people and listen to people. We always said that our job is to listen. Do we need to hear what people need, what they're looking for? We need to ask the proper questions, find out about their health. You know, we used to say in IBM, we used to say the customer is always right, but this isn't about anybody being right or wrong or being nice or not nice. This is finding common solutions, as you say. My experience was that people tended to not be able to listen. They knew they were supposed to, but once they started in, they would want to talk and they would want to tell and they want to preach and they'd want to convince the other person that this particular product is the product that they need. And I watched people struggle for years. It's so hard for people in general to just stop, ask a few questions, listen, find that common ground, but they can be trained. You know, I've learned. I've been trained to a certain extent. I have a long way to go. But yeah, these issues are, when I speak to somebody that's on the opposite side of a political argument, for example, yeah, we have to kind of stay centered and not just react. We have to really do some of these things that you're talking about with common ground. So, yeah, some of this recent conversations with people on the political end of the spectrum, you know, saying things like, I hate them, I wish they'd die, or I think you're wrong, you're misinformed, and statements like these are just not very helpful. So what could we say to depolarize a situation when we find somebody in front of us that's diametrically opposed to what we believe?
Can you give me an example here of something that you've heard?
Well, it's pretty common. People will say, I'll call the red and the blues. The red people will say, I just can't stand to listen to. They're just triggers, you know, like CNN or MSNBC, or the red people might say, the blue people would say, I can't stand to listen to Fox News. Or if you just say the word Trump or say the word Obama, it's like a trigger and it just sets people off. So
Okay.
that's a good example.
Okay, with that example, if I were going to advocate for depolarization and somebody said to me something like that, I might say back, when I hear you say you want them to die, I'm guessing you feel so frustrated that you've given up hope that we can get along. But since they're not really going to die, is there anything that we could do, you and I on the same side, to recover the hope that has held this country together for all these years? Something like that might help depolarize the situation.
Yeah, when people say, if I'm in a conversation or in a group and they say, well, I just don't like those people on the other side. So, or I just don't like the politics, or I don't like the idea of having to wear masks. I think it's wrong. So what would I say when they say something like that?
Well, I would agree with you that it's unreasonable to expect everybody to agree with everybody. But if I disagree with a friend, I can usually work it out and still remain friends. Let's take a situation where I want to go to a movie and my friend wants to go to a ball game. We can continue to disagree and still find a common solution, such as going to a ball game today and going to a movie tomorrow, or we can find other people to go with. So even when I disagree with a friend, I can still find a common solution. And this goes with people I don't like too. We may discover that we can work together even though we don't like each other. Or we may find that we like each other and just disagree on a particular issue. For example, on gun control, we may disagree about a lot of things, but by talking together, we may find that we both want safety for ourselves and for others. Then we can brainstorm ways to meet our common value of safety. I'm not advocating we all agree with each other. Healthy disagreement in a marriage, in a family, in a larger society can lead to unexpected solutions and can change the way we do things that benefit both sides. I'm also not advocating for agreement to meet in the middle just for the sake of being civil, nor agreeing at the expense of personal convictions and values. I'm advocating for discussion that fosters respect for the other side.
Well, if somebody says, I have a right to express my opinions, and if they're really different and I don't agree with them, I guess I would say, yes, you do. And we can agree to not agree on this. But
Right.
the conversation moving, well, I guess what I would do is change the subject, but not change it necessarily as something that's just something we all agree about, but just perhaps ask them more information about why they have that opinion and where did it form and what is their background so that I know what's behind it.
Exactly. That's what I'm advocating for also. We have the right to express our own opinions, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree with me. My goal in talking with the other side is to promote the kind of understanding that you just mentioned, not to convince them or to get them to agree with me. I believe that the more honest and authentic I am when I express my opinions, the more likely I am to be heard. If I'm not authentic, the other side may feel manipulated or deceived. So expressing my own opinions, however strong, is a good thing for depolarization.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it feels like there's a tightrope and I'm just walking on it because I don't want to say the right thing and I want to have a conversation, but I know that it's very, very touchy subject. So I think the whole idea of just being present, being authentic, being who I am is a really good way to go forward. But sometimes, yeah, it's just sometimes tough to find a middle ground or a place where we can meet. I can say, yeah, you have your opinions, and it's interesting because people will say with the pandemic, well, the doctors all say, or scientists will say, and all I can say is I hear scientists on both sides of these issues, and I hear doctors on both sides of these issues. It's really hard for me to really know, so I'm just trying to find out what your opinion is and why. The pandemic is kind of a hard thing to talk about.
It is hard. And specific issues like masks that have become such touch points for disagreement. And you're right, people have different facts that they can point to. I agree that everyone has the right to insist on the truth, but I think that most of what we consider the truth is really colored by my own biases. For example, say there's a traffic accident. One observer might see the truth is that the person who was turning left was at fault because she turned right too soon. Another observer of the same accident might say that the oncoming traffic the person who was coming towards the intersection was at fault because they were going too fast. Both observers may be telling the truth from where they are standing. Even in cases where there's something completely factual, it's probably the interpretation rather than the facts that are the basis for the dispute. In the traffic example, say the police report lays out all the facts on which all the observers agree. The turning car waited 3 seconds before turning. The oncoming car was going at 38.5 miles per hour, and there was a tree on the corner. So we all agree on those facts, but that doesn't mean that all the observers can agree on the interpretation or the relevance of those facts. And if a simple traffic accident can have such different opinions, is it any wonder that more complex human interactions would be the subject of differences of opinion on the facts? I'd give up on trying to prove or disprove the facts and go on with listening for the underlying feelings and needs.
The underlying feelings and needs, that is so smart, because I've written dissertations on facts. It's like, what is a fact? People think that this is a fact. It's like, actually, that's our perception. So it's an interesting, or truth. I've written a lot about what truth is. And I always say truth. It's like, what is God to you? What is anything? And it also makes me remember the one time I was in court because a friend of mine was being prosecuted at a trial. And I sat back there and I just watched, listened to it, and thought, how are these jurists gonna, how's the jury gonna know who's telling the truth and what really happened? Because they had two opposite opinions. And it was like, it's so interesting. I thought, how it kind of made me wonder about our whole jury system, because if they can't even know with all these supposed facts and all the situation in front of them, they end up being a hung jury because they couldn't all decide together. And I know my friend was innocent, and I know his family, and I know the whole circumstances, but they were given different situations where they couldn't even bring a lot of the real what really happened into the court system. It was about some an underage girl. But anyway, the point is that I saw that it would be really hard sitting on a jury to really know. I don't know how many people out there have been on a jury and have been in that situation, but we certainly, if we could just be a jury when people are giving two different sets of facts, and we could think in terms of yes, yes, no, no, and listen, like you say, and be aware of what's going on. But yeah, getting out of the facts and getting into our heart and getting into more of a resonance of what feels good when we're talking with somebody, and where is our common ground. So you say that the key skill needed, what would you say is the key skill needed for the depolarizing a conversation?
Well, I think a lot of what you just said is very relevant. I think the most important skill is listening, but listening with my heart as well as my head. Listening not just to the words, but also for the underlying concerns, values, feelings, and needs. But beyond listening in an ordinary conversation, obviously not in a jury situation, another skill is to make sure that the other side knows we hear them. I can do this in a variety of ways. I can paraphrase what I heard. I can ask questions based on what I heard. I can ask directly for clarification. So listening is, I would think, the very most important skill. But when I'm speaking about my own opinions, it helps to acknowledge that these are my opinions. I do this by using I messages. I feel, I believe, I'm concerned about. Phrases like that. It also helps other people understand me if I'm not only going to state my opinions, but also explain the feelings, needs, and experiences that led me to those opinions. It's especially important that these I messages do not contain judgments about the other side. These are my opinions, and I want to be humble about my opinions. It also helps to depolarize if I keep the conversation respectful. If the other side says something provocative, I can cool the conversation down by refusing to take the bait. For example, if the other side says, anyone who owns a gun is a blah, blah idiot, then I could say, I'm curious why you think gun ownership is a problem. Of course, the tone of voice is equally important in communication. If I say the same sentence with contempt, I'm curious why you think gun ownership is a problem, I'll probably escalate the situation rather than de-escalate. The key is genuine curiosity about what's going on in the other person. Finally, it also helps to acknowledge areas of agreement and disagreement. For example, I know that you and I disagree on some things about guns, but I really want to understand more about what we agree and where we disagree. Maybe later in the conversation, I might say, I'm hearing we both agree that children should not have access to guns. So look for areas of agreement, and where there are areas of disagreement, acknowledge them. I think those are the key skills I would point to. Listening, using iMessages when I'm speaking, keeping the conversation respectful, and acknowledging areas of agreement and disagreement.
It's so good. It almost makes me want to put a list together of the most polarizing topics and say, here's some ideas of where a middle ground might be. When you just said that about children, yeah, I think everybody would agree. Probably we should try to keep those guns away from the children. And that's a wonderful place to find a middle ground. Sometimes it's difficult to come up in the moment with something like that, but maybe with these really harshly divisive issues, we could actually find some of those and practice them. I hear people just kind of reacting. It's like, guns are bad. How could you kill something? Or you've gotta wear a mask. Everybody knows that. Or one thing we can agree on is that, everybody believes in God. People just bam, bam, and it's kind of like being fired at. But to be able to have the skills to de-escalate that and finding that place where we might be able to both agree is really important. I hope that people that are listening to this can listen to themselves, because until we see ourselves, hear ourselves doing this, we probably don't even realize that we react the way we do, and that we just blame and start an argument, and they only want to tell the other person what they believe. So this is all really good. I wish we could have it on the nightly news. Although not that many people watch the nightly news anymore. But okay, so you talked about teaching this. Are there programs that can help with the depolarization, and how do we find out about them?
Yeah, there are a lot of programs. On the political scene, one that I know of is named Braver Angels. The name of the organization refers to Abraham Lincoln's appeal to the better angels of our nature in helping bind up the nation after the Civil War. And the braver part in the name of the organization refers to the courage it takes to engage in these difficult conversations. Braver Angels offers a variety of programs that bring together reds and blues for workshops, discussions, and debates. You can find more information on their webpage, braverangels.org. As far as learning and practicing skills on how to speak and listen in difficult situations, there are also many, many groups. The group that I mentioned I've become part of is called Nonviolent Communication. And it's named after the nonviolent movements of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. There are many local chapters with their own websites all over the country, all over the world. In the Denver area, the website of the Rocky Mountain Center for Compassionate Communication uses the initials rmccn.org. The international group related to nonviolent communication is the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and it uses initials too, cnvc.org.
CNBC, that's interesting. Oh, CN as in natural, V as in victory, C, not CNBC. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to try to put that on the bottom of the video if people are watching this, or the podcast, they can listen to it again to get the correct places to go. So, does it really come down to what kind of world we want to live in?
Well, yeah, I would agree that it's really about what kind of world we want to live in. As individuals, as a community, as a nation, we've got a choice. Do we want to condemn and dehumanize those with different opinions? Or can we see the human faces in everyone and find a way to respect them, even if we disagree? Can we look for common ground? Can we perhaps even see ways to benefit from our differences? When we gather next Thanksgiving with the family, do we want to listen, try to understand, and speak our own truths with the people we care about? Or will we remain silent about what we really think, trying to avoid confrontation? Or worse, will we blame the other side and cause a fight that gets nowhere at Thanksgiving? I'm not suggesting that we compromise our own values. Most of us share the values enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, freedom, fairness, justice for all. Where we differ is not in our values, but in the way we prioritize and implement those values. If we can get past the labels, liberal, conservative, progressive, authoritarian, and the hate that we've built up, if we can listen and find good ideas on both sides, we can emerge from this pandemic with stronger communities and with a stronger nation. Now, some of our nation's leaders on both sides of the political divide seem to actively try to promote division. They think they'll gain votes or power by demonizing people who disagree with them. I think it's time that we, the people, can ourselves lead the leaders to a more perfect union. We have a choice, and the pandemic may actually help us to choose what kind of world we want to live in.
Yeah, maybe so. And it's so true that at this point, many of us are saying we're going to have to just deal with this on community level or individual level, because we don't see a lot of coming together at a national or even state level for most people. This makes a lot of sense. It really raises the whole question and raises the whole topic into a place where we can learn and practice speaking and being respectful to one another. Listening, it's all about listening, isn't it?
It's all about listening and being about authentic and non-judgmental in our own opinions.
And I would just add to that, as I said a little earlier, being the witness, being attentive to what we are saying, because we can only really be responsible for ourselves, and actually noticing when we're being reactive or argumentative or divisive, polarizing ourselves. That's where it's going to start
Sure,
individually.
I agree.
for all of this. You have wisdom on the subject, and boy, I wish you could get out there and speak to the masses. It would be so much more fun to listen to that than political rallies for the next 3 or 4 months. So thank you for
Oh,
out and sharing with us, and we look forward to more from you in the future.
well, thank you so much for listening. I've really enjoyed this chance to raise the possibility that we can actually do something about depolarization.
Me too. I've been scooting around the around the yard as the sun keeps changing because it was really hard to see anything except a big bright light in my face. But okay, we'll talk soon. I'm going to end this for now. Thank you again.